Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to Open Forum, a three-level listening and speaking skills series for English language learners who need practice in extended listening and discussion in preparation for academic work or to attain a personal goal. The series is structured around high-interest listening texts with an academic focus that engage and motivate learners. Chapters feature academic content areas such as business, history, or psychology. The content areas are revisited as the series progresses, ensuring that learners recycle and extend the ideas and vocabulary of each topic. Focused practice in listening and speaking skills is integrated into each chapter, and this course is for students at the intermediate level. Wish you all the best and good luck. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The first chapter of this book talks about inner cities, the growth of suburbs, and how to plan for new cities. This chapter has three main objectives. Number one, to understand topics related to environment by activating your background knowledge. Two, to apply that knowledge in listening. And the third objective is to use vocabulary related to environment in speaking. The vocabulary log of this chapter include words like crime, inner city, suburb, downtown, commute, revitalize, diversity, community, vacant, attraction, impact, security, mugging, and surroundings. Now, you are going to listen to a lecture talks about cities. After you listen to this lecture, you are required to answer the following questions.
Now, as you probably know, U.S. inner cities have been in a bad state for several decades. They tend to be high crime areas with a lot of vacant buildings and so on. Today, we'll talk about how this happened and what is being done about it. Well, first, you can't talk about the decline of the inner cities without looking at the growth of the suburbs, because the two are connected. There was, and still is, a huge demand for suburban housing in the last 30, 40 years or so. So what we've seen all over the country is a lot of development of areas just outside of cities, areas that were once farmlands, acres and acres of land just given over to suburban housing. We call it suburban sprawl because of the way the houses are kind of spread out all over the countryside. As the suburbs grew, the inner cities declined. Well, you can imagine how this happens. When people move to the suburbs, it's more convenient for them to shop at the shopping malls closer to home. So the department stores in the downtown area, they don't get as much business. And, well, maybe eventually they have to close. You see this particularly in small and mid-sized towns. You might have an area that has quite a large population, but the downtown is dead, especially at night. As a result of that, we've had growing crime rates and poverty in downtown areas. So people are afraid to go there at night, and there ends up being less cultural life in these towns. So city planners have been trying to attract people back to the cities. It's become a necessity, really, because you can't keep building suburbs forever, and people don't want to commute 2 or more hours to get to their jobs. They want to come back to live in the cities, but you have to make the conditions right. So, how do you do that? Well, city planners are using an approach called smart growth as a way to plan neighborhoods and revitalize inner cities. I'll explain some of the main characteristics of smart growth. First, smart growth encourages diversity of use. For example, many planners believe now that it's healthy to have some light manufacturing, say bakeries or printing presses, mixed in with retail and residential buildings, all together in the same area. And one reason to do this is that a street has people in it all day long. You've got the people who work there during the day and the people who live there coming back in the evenings. The area is used more. Sidewalks are busy. This makes it possible for stores and restaurants to open up to serve all these people, which in turn encourages more people. And then that makes a neighborhood more attractive. Okay, secondly, you want to have diversity of housing. Instead of having streets and streets of identical houses like you have in the suburbs, you would have a mix of single-family homes, townhouses, and apartment buildings that would encourage a wider range of people in terms of ages and income levels to live in an area. So people can stay in a community. They can move up to a larger house or move to a smaller house when they get older without leaving the community. The other big aspect of smart growth is to make it possible for people to walk to schools, public libraries, and stores, and so on. So you put these things within walking distance of residential neighborhoods. It's also important to have attractive places outside, places to gather or sit and relax. This brings people out onto the streets, and streets that have people in them are safer streets. When you have safer streets, you have more people wanting to live downtown, and that causes a demand for more housing. And that, in turn, revitalizes inner cities even more. Now, one city where this kind of thing is being done is Pittsburgh. Let's have a look at some photographs that were taken.
Okay. After you listen to the lecture, number the topics in the order that they are discussed. Here we have 4 topics: the characteristics of smart growth, the decline of the inner cities, the growth of the suburbs, and the role of city planners. So how about the order these topics have been mentioned? Number 1, according to the audio track, the first topic mentioned was the decline of the inner cities. The second topic was the growth of the suburbs. The third topic was the role of city planners. And the last topic was the characteristics of smart growth. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the second listening practice of this chapter. In this section, you are going to hear an interview with an expert on planning public parks. After you listen, check the 3 features that are discussed.
Public spaces are the places where we interact with other people in our community. Streets, shopping malls, public parks, and so on. Public spaces have a huge impact on the quality of life of the people who use them, especially in cities. Today, we're going to talk about parks. Our guest is Charles Ong from the Parks Planning Association, and he's going to tell us what makes a good public park. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
First of all, is there such a thing as a bad public park? I mean, aren't all parks good?
Well, no. I think if you think about it, some parks just don't work for one reason or another. They're not used, or they're used for criminal activity. They're usually empty. They've got litter and graffiti, or they're just a green space put there with nothing to attract people.
Now that you mention it, I can think of a few places like that.
A good public park, or any public space, doesn't have to be a park, is above all attractive. People want to go there.
Give me an example of a public park that works.
Oh, there are lots. Central Park in New York, for example, is a great park. There's a lot to do there. You've got several museums right around it, and in the park itself, you have the children's zoo, you have outdoor theater, you have a skating rink, lots of playgrounds, community centers, and so on. All of that brings people in. Same kind of thing with Boston Common, Balboa Park in San Diego, the lakefront in Chicago. I could go on.
But what about smaller parks? You can't always have an art museum or a zoo.
No, but the principle is the same. If you're designing a smaller park, you still need to provide enough activities. And what you want to do is connect the activities to each other. For example, let's say you have a park with a playground in one corner and a fountain in the middle. Well, that's nice, but there's not enough there to attract people. But if you link the two together, say you make a water feature in the playground, or you make the fountain safe so that kids can play in it in the summer, and if you add some good seating where people can watch both areas, then you provide more reasons for people to go there. And if you add a food stand, then you're getting somewhere. Food always attracts people.
Right, I get it.
You want to have it used by different kinds of people. You want children and older people and women. And that, by the way, is often a good indicator of how successful a city park is.
What, women?
Yeah, women and elderly people. Women are generally more aware of their surroundings. They're much less likely to sit down or relax in a public area if they feel uncomfortable.
Right. Now that I think of it, some places don't even provide places to sit.
Yeah, seating is a big thing. A lot of parks don't have enough seating, or it's uncomfortable, or the seats are out in the wind or the sun. Ideally, people should be able to move the seats around. You get that in some parks in Europe. People can pick up a chair and move it wherever they want.
But that raises some security issues.
Yes, it's only possible where there's a fairly good security presence.
What about access to a park? You know, when you spend ages trying to find the way into a park. I've had that experience.
Yeah, when you're walking around and around looking for the entrance.
Yeah.
That's a problem sometimes, but it's not just that. Even if the entrance is visible, the interior has to be visible too. You have to be able to see what's inside. You don't want people feeling afraid to go in there, like they're going to be mugged or something. It has to be welcoming.
You need to see where the paths go too, right? So you can say, oh, I'll take a shortcut through the park and that'll take me over there or over there.
Right. And one thing that drives me crazy in public parks is paths that don't lead to anywhere, or that don't go where people want to go. They're just there for the sake of it. You want paths that attract people and pull them along.
It seems so obvious.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But a lot of parks are put in with very little consideration of how to make them work.
So now, what are the 3 features that are discussed in the interview? Here, as you can see, we have 5 features. These features are activities, trees and plants, seating, entrances and paths, and monuments. According to the audio track, the 3 features mentioned in the interview were activities, seating, and entrances and paths. Thank you very much and see you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the second chapter of this book, which deals with leisure activities and quality of life. The main objectives of this chapter is to relate your knowledge of leisure activities to the concept of flow and apply it in listening and speaking. 2. To reflect on listening. 3. To use vocabulary related to psychology in speaking. 4. To apply your knowledge of affixation and forming words in speaking. The vocabulary log of this chapter include words like research, concentrate, absorb, challenging, experience, reflect, optimal, boredom, motivation, socialize, participate, and stay up. Now you are going to listen to a radio program about the concept of flow. After you listen to the program, complete each statement with the correct ending.
Hello and welcome to our show. Our guest today is Dr. Lynette Hahn, a psychologist who does research into happiness. She spends a lot of time studying people's level of enjoyment during various activities, and she's especially interested in something called flow. Dr. Hahn, could you explain what flow is?
Yes. It's a concept described by a psychologist named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He talks about states of optimal experience, where people say they experience feelings of deep concentration and enjoyment during activities.
Can you give us an example?
Of course. Do you have an activity that you really enjoy?
Well, I like a lot of sports and I love cooking.
Okay, take cooking. Think about making a meal. If you ever get so absorbed in preparing the food that you lose all awareness of time and other things around you, when you are concentrating so deeply that you completely forget all your problems, then you're probably experiencing flow.
Oh, I've had that happen, especially when I'm trying a new recipe.
You're more likely to experience flow with a new recipe because that challenges you. According to Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, one of the requirements for a state of optimal experience is that the activity has to be challenging and require skills. So, you would use your cooking skills in a new recipe, and it would be challenging because you hadn't done it before. Other requirements are deep concentration, a merging of action and awareness, a sense of control, clear goals, and immediate feedback.
Are there only certain types of activities where this can happen, or can it happen with any activity?
Well, flow can happen with a lot of different activities, from reading to playing chess to rock climbing. However, if you look at the requirements we just talked about, some activities wouldn't fit. Think of watching TV, for example. You might concentrate deeply on watching a TV program, but there's really no skill involved, and it's unlikely to be challenging. Dr. Csikszentmihalyi actually uses a chart to show the relationship between challenge and skill that is necessary for flow to happen. It involves low levels of boredom and worry, and high but balanced levels of skill and challenge.
Okay. I was a little surprised to see that reading is an activity that could create a state of flow, but now I understand. Reading involves some level of skill and challenge in terms of understanding language, whereas watching TV doesn't typically offer that.
Yes, that's right. Really, there are so many activities that can lead to flow. Singing, skiing, painting, and a lot of games that we play.
Is experiencing flow the same as feeling happy?
No, there's definitely a difference. If you're in a state of flow, your attention is so focused that you aren't even aware of how you feel about the situation. Reflecting on whether you feel happy or not would mean you were out of flow. It's only later, after the state has passed, that you can be aware of the pleasure of that state. So, in that way, it's different from flow, and you can feel happy without experiencing flow. For example, sitting on a beach might make you feel happy, but not necessarily create a state of flow.
Why does all this matter?
Well, I believe, as Dr. Csikszentmihalyi does, that experiences of flow are pleasurable for people and contribute to quality of life. So, if people are more aware of which experiences produce this state, they can work toward including more of them in their lives.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hahn. We're going to take a break right now.
Okay, let's start with number 1. Flow is described by a psychologist as a state of A. Optimal experience or deep relaxation. According to the psychologist, he described the concept of flow as an optimal experience, not deep relaxation. Number 2, a person can experience flow during A, one or two types of activities only, B, many different activities. Again, according to the psychologist, we can experience flow during many different activities, not only one or two. Number 3, flow is A, the same as feeling happy, B, different from feeling happy. Actually, flow is the opposite meaning of happiness. We don't feel happy when we experience flow. So the correct answer is B. It is different from feeling happy. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the second listening practice of this chapter. This section talks about quality of life. In this section, you are going to listen to the personal interviews about some results of the survey on quality of life with 4 people. Each of these people has different perspectives about the quality of life. After you listen, you are required to write 2 things that each person enjoys.
Okay, Julia. Now, from your responses, it looks like of the daily activities like housework and driving, you've rated driving as giving you quite high levels of enjoyment, motivation, and concentration.
Yes, I was surprised when I looked at my answers too. I wouldn't have expected it, but now I realize that driving is actually usually pleasant for me. I mean, obviously not when there's a huge traffic jam or anything, but otherwise I enjoy it. I concentrate on driving, which usually means that I can't worry about all my everyday concerns and problems. I have about a half-hour drive to and from work, so it allows me to get ready for work on the way there and then relax and wind down on the way home. I'm by myself and I usually listen to music or interesting programs on the radio. So I guess, all in all, it's a pretty pleasant experience for me.
Another activity with high ratings was doing a hobby. You indicate that you play the guitar?
Yes, I was thinking of that when I answered the questions. I usually play the guitar at least 3 times a week. I play in a group with friends, and I play by myself, too. I have to concentrate when I play, and I'm usually motivated to... I don't want to make a lot of mistakes when I play with my friends. I just love playing. When we get going on a new song, I just forget everything else that's going on.
Overall, doing housework didn't rate very high.
No, housework of any kind isn't a favorite for me.
It looks like working with computers rated highly for you, Leo. Do you work with computers at your job, or is it a hobby?
Actually, both. I just love computers so much that there isn't really that much difference between work and play for me when it comes to computers. Computer programming is my job, but I also play a lot of computer games when I'm not working. A friend and I are actually working on developing our own game to sell. I guess some people might see that as work, but for us it's fun. We get together and start discussing it or working on it, and we can go for hours and hours without stopping. We sometimes stay up until 3 or 4 in the morning if we're trying to solve a problem or something.
Oh, speaking of friends, it also looks like you rate socializing highly, too.
Yes. It might be a little surprising since many people think that people who love computers don't socialize, but my friends are really important to me, and we get together a lot. Of course, we talk about computers an awful lot, but we talk about other things, too.
Okay, it seems like you enjoy really active things, Annie.
Yes, definitely. I like almost any kind of sport, really, and I do them as much as possible. Soccer, tennis, running, whatever.
Do you prefer individual or team sports?
Well, both, really. It depends on the mood I'm in. I play soccer at least once a week, so that's a team sport. But then I also run about 3 times a week, and that's something I do alone. So I guess it's probably pretty much a mix of both.
What about your job? You've rated it in the middle.
Yeah. I'm an elementary school teacher, and I like that. But then I also coach some school sports teams, basketball and soccer. I get enjoyment from teaching, but I think I like coaching more.
What about activities that are less active? Do you participate in any?
Not very often. I'm home a few evenings a week, and sometimes I sit down and watch TV, but it's not all that often.
So, Robert, a lot of people don't find pleasure in housework, but it looks like you rate washing dishes pretty high.
Yes, I know it might seem a little strange. I'm an executive with a high-pressure job. I'm busy all the time, and I like doing dishes, but it's relaxing for me. And it often turns out to be good thinking time. I'm surprised at how often I come up with solutions to problems while I'm washing dishes. Then it's always satisfying when I finish and everything is completely clean.
It looks like work, your job, has a medium rating.
Yes, as I said, I have a pretty high-pressure job. I like it and I'm good at it, but it's challenging. And the stress gets to me. So I'm usually really happy when the weekends come.
And what do you like to do on weekends?
Well, I'm pretty busy. I have an old house that I'm fixing up. I'm doing all the work myself, so there's always something to do on that. I enjoy bicycling too, and since I don't have a lot of time during the week, I try to ride a lot on weekends.
Okay. Here, as you can see, we have 4 people. These people are Julia, Leo, Annie, and Robert. So what are the things that each person enjoys? How about Julia? For Julia, the quality of life is driving, and playing guitar. How about Leo? For Leo, the quality of life is working on computers, and socializing. He likes to socialize with other people. How about Annie? For Annie, she likes to participate in sports and coaching sports. The last one, Robert. The quality of life for Robert is doing dishes, which is, I think, very interesting. Doing dishes. Fixing up his house. And the last one, bicycling. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the 3rd chapter of this book, which deals with food science. This chapter talks about food in general, our eating habits, and how our eating habits have changed over time. The main objectives of this chapter include 1. To use words related to food science in speaking. 2. Apply this knowledge in understanding lectures related to food science. 3. Reflect on listening. The vocabulary log of this chapter include words like nutrient, crave, nutrition, flavor, appreciate, toxicity, injection, biological, consumption, factor, influence, prediction, and trend. Now, you are going to listen to a lecture about food tastes. After you listen to this lecture, you are required to complete each statement correctly.
For many years, scientists have believed in the wisdom of the body, the idea that our bodies know what they need to stay healthy. So, by this theory, when we're hungry for a certain food, it's just our bodies letting us know that we need a specific nutrient. For example, you might crave steak because you need protein. But this idea doesn't cover the reality of our eating habits. So much of what we love to eat, think of cookies or French fries, doesn't offer much nutrition. And many people don't like foods that offer lots of vitamins. Think of spinach or broccoli. So the idea that eating only supports life doesn't really offer a full explanation of our eating patterns. For a long time, there was a lot about our eating habits that was not fully understood by scientists. But in the last few years, new studies have given researchers more information. One discovery is that humans are born loving sweetness. On its first day of life, a newborn baby will prefer sweetened drinks to unsweetened ones. Sugar can even block out pain. Doctors have found that babies won't mind the pain of a needle for an injection as much if they are given some sugar beforehand. Then there are sour tastes. It's often surprising how much young children love sour flavors. Think of how many kinds of candy for children with really sour flavors there are. Lemon, sour apple, and so on. Candy companies must have realized this a while ago, but it was only recently that science confirmed it. A study found that children between the ages of 5 and 9 years old actually enjoy the flavor of concentrated citric acid, and citric acid makes things sour. In contrast, bitter flavors are mainly appreciated by older adults. Children and pregnant women usually dislike bitter tastes. This is probably because bitterness can be a sign of toxicity, that something could be harmful, which would be more important during times of growth and development. However, as people get older, they often develop more of a taste for foods with a little bitterness. Scientists think this could make sense because foods like broccoli or dark chocolate, both of which have a slightly bitter flavor, usually also contain antioxidants that help fight diseases like cancer. So, there are similarities in taste preferences, but then why are our individual preferences so different? One explanation is that our preferences are shaped by our flavor experiences at a very early age, including before we're born. For example, one study found that if a pregnant woman drank carrot juice late in pregnancy, her 6-month-old baby liked carrot-flavored cereal more than other 6-month-old babies. Another area of difference involves food cravings, intense and specific desires for a certain food. Scientists now believe these are also probably more related to childhood and culture than to some kind of biological need for vitamins. A study by psychologists on 3 continents, in the countries of Egypt, Spain, and the United States, looked at cravings by both men and women. Before the study, one assumption was that women universally crave chocolate. However, while the study found that women often crave sweeter food than men, there were differences regarding chocolate. In Spain, both men and women were found to crave chocolate. But in Egypt, only 6% of women named chocolate as a favorite food. So a conclusion is that cravings are not universal or based on biology, but are more the result of our cultural experiences with food. Now, family and culture don't explain all of our individual differences in food preferences. Obviously, there are people who have dramatically different preferences from their parents. So, there's still more to learn. Scientists are now paying a lot more attention to the psychology of food choice. They may find that what we think about food could turn out to be as important as what we actually put in our mouths and eat.
Okay. Let's start with the first statement. According to the wisdom of the body theory, we want certain food because A. We need nutrients. B. We like the taste. Or C. We need the nutrients and we like the taste. According to the lecture, we want certain food because we need the nutrients and we like the taste. Number 2. The wisdom of the body theory doesn't fully explain our eating habits because A. Different people like different food. B. People have different ideas about nutrition. Or C. We often eat food low in nutrition and don't like food high in nutrition. Okay, again, according to the lecture, the correct answer is C. Because we often eat food low in nutrition and don't like food high in nutrition. The third statement. Babies prefer sweet drinks A. About 3 days after they are born. B. On the day they are born. Or C. On their first birthday. According to the lecture, the correct answer is B. Babies prefer sweet drinks on the day they are born. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the second listening practice of chapter 3. In this section, you are going to listen to the interview with a food scientist. After listening, check each of the topics that are discussed in the interview.
Good morning. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, food. It's something we can't live without, yet we might take it for granted in some ways. Have you ever stopped to think about how our appetites and eating habits have changed? Or, for that matter, considered how these habits might change in the future? Our guest today is Roger Sabarta, a food scientist who's done a lot of research in these areas. Welcome, Mr. Sabarta.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, what's one of the biggest changes in eating habits that you found?
Well, I'd say that the biggest change, and really the one that also has the most implications for health and things like that, is the amount of eating out that most of us do nowadays. In 1955, the percentage of food budgets spent away from home was 19%, and in 1997 it was 38%, and it just keeps going up.
I'd never really thought of it, but of course, thinking of my parents and how often they were likely to eat out compared to me in my life, well, it's a lot different.
Exactly, and then kids nowadays eat out even more often. In the same 42 years from 1955 to 1997, fast food consumption increased 166% for teenage boys.
166%? Wow. So teenage boys are eating a lot more fast food than they used to.
Yes, it's really striking. Now, think of some of the effects of this change in habit.
I guess it probably isn't all that healthy.
Not really. For example, there's soda and soft drinks versus milk. 20 or 25 years ago, people, especially kids, drank a lot more milk. Nowadays, people drink about twice as much soda as they used to, and a lot less milk.
And that's because of eating out so much?
Yes, at least to some extent. Of course, there are other factors contributing to this. The amount of advertising done by the food and drink industry goes up every year, so that certainly has an effect as well.
Does your research suggest that this trend will continue?
Pretty much so. The strongest influence that we see on this is income. If people have more income, they usually eat out more. However, one factor that could affect this is age. Older people typically eat out less than younger people, and since we expect the population of older people to increase, this could result in smaller numbers for eating out.
Unless, of course, older people change their habits and eat out more.
Absolutely. It's certainly possible.
What else does your research predict for the future?
Well, demand for more variety in foods is definitely one thing. We've already seen this change, and we expect it to continue. Just think of the variety of types of food available in supermarkets and restaurants these days.
You mean like Mexican food or Chinese food and things like that?
Or Indian food, or Thai food, and so on.
Yes. There are so many different types of restaurants in my area compared to 10 years ago. I assume this is because of immigration?
Yes, that's right. As new populations come to the United States, of course, they bring food traditions and preferences. So this definitely influences food trends. And these can be positive influences. For example, the consumption of citrus fruit is expected to rise over the next 20 years or so because of consumers coming from places where fruit is a big part of the diet.
Well, that would be good.
Another aspect of this is that people just want variety. They may love a special new flavor of potato chip, but after a while it becomes a little boring and they start looking for another new flavor. So this will also produce continued variety in food options.
It seems like we already see this a lot. There's one flavor of something, and then they have to make lots of different flavors.
Yes, that's right.
Were there any surprises in your predictions?
Well, I was a little surprised that we expect people to want quality more than quantity in the future. You know, everyone seems to want quantity right now. Larger hamburgers, more French fries, and so on, but our analysis suggests that this will change, that people will ask for more quality. For example, they might want a special type of meat rather than just a hamburger and things like that.
Yes, that is a little surprising. Well, we have to stop here. Thank you very much, Mr. Sabarta.
Okay. As you can see here, we have 6 topics in this slide, but in the interview, only 4 topics have been discussed. So what do you think? What are these topics? Let me read the topics first. 1. Eating out and eating at home. 2. Amount of vegetables eaten. 3. Consumption of soft drinks and milk. 4. Variety of foods. 5. Types of supermarkets. 6. Quality and quantity of food. So what are the 4 topics mentioned or discussed in the interview? The first topic mentioned in the interview was eating out and eating at home. The second topic was consumption of soft drinks and milk. The third topic, variety of foods. And the last topic discussed in this interview was quality and quantity of food. So, as you can see here, only 2 topics have not been discussed in the interview. These topics are types of supermarkets and amount of vegetables eaten. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to chapter 5 of this book, which deals with life science. The main topics of this chapter are ocean research and condor preservation. The objectives of this chapter include 1. To apply your knowledge for asking for further information. 2. To use vocabulary related to life science. 3. To apply your knowledge of suffixes in forming words in speaking. The vocabulary log of this chapter include words like ocean, recreation, prescription, derive, enormous, resource, ancient, marine, contamination, combat, recovery, survive, offspring, potentially, harass. Now, you are going to listen to a radio program about research in oceans. After you listen, match each creature to an area of research.
Good morning and welcome to Science World. Our first story today takes us into the water, actually, to the bottom of the ocean in some cases. Tanya Ruiz has an interesting story about oceans and medical research.
Hello. So many of us love the ocean. We love going to the beach and enjoying the sun, sand, and water. But how often do you stop and think about how important oceans are? Not only do they provide a place for recreation, but they also give us food and energy. And more, oceans offer the possibility of new information for treating human disease as well as new medicines. Researchers have long searched the natural world, forests, swamps, and rainforests, for substances to use in medicine. In fact, more than half of all prescription drugs are derived from naturally occurring products. And now, scientists are looking to the oceans for their research. Did you know that water covers about 71% of Earth's surface? Yes, 71%. And 97% of that water is in the oceans. So it's not surprising that oceans support the greatest variety of life on the planet. And now, new technologies allow researchers to go deeper into the ocean, deeper than they've ever been able to go. And as a result, it's possible to study fish and other sea life that they've never been able to study before. So scientists hope this will offer new and possibly enormous resources for the medical field. Now, you may not realize it, but there are already some medical substances in use today that were derived from the sea. The horseshoe crab, a very old, actually ancient marine creature, is one of the most famous examples. In the 1950s, scientists discovered that the blood of the horseshoe crab could protect it from bacteria. And they realized that this could be helpful in medical procedures for humans. As a result, it's now commonly used in hospitals to test for contamination that would be harmful to humans. Current research focuses on a wide range of ocean life, from fish to coral to whales to mud on the bottom of the ocean. One example is the skatefish. The skatefish has unique eyes and can see in total darkness. Researchers are studying how the eyes of this fish work, with the hope of learning more about eye disease in humans, which often leads to blindness. Another fish that scientists want to learn about is the toadfish. The toadfish is a very unattractive fish, but it interests scientists because it can swim incredibly fast, about 40 times faster than a world-class human sprinter. Researchers are studying the anatomy of the fish in the hopes of being able to use what they learn to help with, among other things, heart disease in humans. It makes sense that muscles that can work as fast as a toadfish's might give researchers clues about how to help human muscles that are failing from disease. There's also a snail that scientists believe will offer a new painkiller. And then there's coral. There are substances from coral that researchers hope might offer a way to combat cancer. And finally, a possible innovation in washing clothes. A bacteria from whales that helps break down oily stains in laundry. Obviously, this might help make a better laundry detergent someday. So, there's a lot of variety in the research. Some scientists caution that this is all a very slow process and that we have to be careful. It could take years for any one thing to be tested and proven safe and useful. But many researchers are still excited and hopeful. And then, of course, everyone is aware that it's important to protect the oceans when we do this work. But this gives us all a little more to think about next time we're lying on a beach in the sun. This is Tanya Ruiz for Science World.
Okay, here as you can see we have 6 types or 6 kinds of sea creatures, which include horseshoe crab, skatefish, toadfish, snail, coral, and whale. So you are required to match each sea creature with an area of research, and we have here 6 areas of research, which include painkillers, muscles or heart disease, detergents, contamination or sterilization, eye disease, and cancer. So what do you think? How about painkillers? Painkillers, the area of research of painkillers is connected to snails. How about B? Muscles or heart disease? This area of research is connected to toadfish. How about detergents? Detergents is connected to whale. Number 6. Contamination or sterilization is connected to 1. Horseshoe crab. Eye disease is connected to skatefish. Cancer is connected to coral. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the second listening practice of this chapter, which deals with condors. In this section, you are going to listen to a biologist talk about a program to save condors and reintroduce them into the wild. After you listen, you are required to number the topics in the order they are mentioned.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Condor Station. I'd like to give you a little bit of history and background for our Condor Recovery Program, and then I'll answer any questions you might have. I'll start with some history. In 1987, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service captured the last condor in the wild and put it into a breeding program. Imagine, that was the last wild condor, and no one knew if the species could recover. Fortunately, the surviving condors mated and produced offspring. Now, after more than 17 years, there are 149 condors living in captivity and 99 flying free in California, Arizona, and Baja, Mexico. More birds are being released into the wild whenever possible, and we know that at least 5 pairs of birds are mating in the wild. So that's good news. Now, you can guess that we'd want to keep track of the birds in the wild. So, how do we do that? We've used different tracking systems, but now GPS, Global Positioning Systems, attached to the birds give us our best information. Just so you can appreciate our work, think of trying to attach one of the units to a bird with a 9-foot wingspan. Those wings could come close to knocking you out, and the beak is as sharp as the sharpest knife in your kitchen. This part of the job can be challenging. Anyway, GPS gives us a lot of data, geographic coordinates within 14 feet for up to 16 hours a day. This is very specific and useful information. One thing we've learned is that condors fly a lot more distance in any day than we ever knew. We've also discovered something that is very interesting and potentially even more helpful. We found that the species is intelligent and much more complicated than we thought. Until now, we hadn't really known how much condors actually have to learn to survive in the wild, but we now know that they do indeed have to learn to survive. An example of this comes from one of the mistakes we made in the early days of raising baby condors. We had humans taking care of the babies. The people wore puppets on their hands that looked like adult condors, but they didn't act like parent condors. They just used the puppets to give the babies food. Then those babies were put together with other babies and had no contact with adult condors. Now, what we realized later was that because of this approach, the baby condors didn't learn to be afraid of people. After they were released, they would approach people without any fear at all, begging for food at campgrounds and things like that. They acted like pets instead of wild animals. Obviously, this wasn't good. After watching adult condors with babies, we realized that the parent condors taught the babies a lot about being cautious and defending themselves. The parent condors spent a lot of time harassing their babies, pecking at them and pushing them away when they're too curious. And this teaches them to be careful and to protect themselves. So now we consider this in raising baby condors. All the babies in the program are raised either by an adult condor or by a human wearing a puppet that looks like a condor. The humans are trained to act like a parent condor, as I said, pecking and harassing the babies. We found that baby condors raised in this way, actually taught to be cautious, are much more likely to avoid humans. Another area we've learned a lot about because of the GPS monitoring is the way groups of condors relate and work together. Condors are scavengers, so they need to look for dead animals to eat. Now, you've probably never thought of it, but that's not the same as an animal that hunts for food. Think about it. A scavenger is dependent on finding a dead animal to eat at the right time, or it goes hungry. So what we found is that condors actually share information about good locations for food. There's actually a kind of apprenticeship where condors work together. A more experienced bird helps a less experienced bird learn where to find food. It's not really something you'd imagine birds doing, is it? Another surprising point is how social these birds are. Through the information from GPS units, we found that birds actually do like to socialize. One group of birds will travel about 160 miles down the coast to visit another group and hang out. That's something many of us can relate to, although we might not travel 160 miles all that often, even to visit a good friend. So that's some background on the condors. Why is this work important? Well, first, of course, we'd like to have wild condors living without interference from us. But in a broader sense, we can always learn. As I've mentioned, we found that condors are very intelligent, and their lives are more complex than we'd realized. So we never know what else we might learn, or how this information might apply to other animals' problems, or even people's problems for that matter.
Okay. As you can see here, we have 4 topics. Number 1, use of global positioning system. 2, working together and socializing. 3, background and history. And 4, raising baby condors. So what do you think the first topic discussed in the program? The first topic discussed in the program was giving background and history of condors. So this was the first topic. The second topic was the use of global positioning system, GPS. The third topic discussed in the program was raising baby condors. And according to the program, the last topic mentioned and discussed was working together and socializing. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to chapter 7 of this book. In this chapter, we are going to discuss language and communication. The main topics of this chapter include endangered languages and different languages in the United States. The main objectives of this chapter include 1. To understand how to prepare for presentations. 2. To use vocabulary related to language and communication in speaking. 3. To use words and expressions related to work. The vocabulary log of this chapter include words like census, compare, predominant, makeup, implement, estimate, disappear, extinct, criterion, concerned, tradition, viewpoint, increase, exclusively, and linguist. Now, you are going to listen to a lecture. After you listen to it, choose the best summary.
Good afternoon. Today's lecture is about different languages spoken in the United States. The Modern Language Association has put together data on the numbers of speakers and the locations of the 30 most commonly spoken languages in the United States. Let me first explain how the information was gathered. The data came from U.S. Census information. In addition to the usual census questions about number of family members and age, people were asked about language. If a language other than English was spoken at home. If the answer was yes, then the person was asked to name the language. You might be surprised at how many different languages were reported. 300. Yes, 300 different languages are spoken in the United States. The Modern Language Association focuses on the 30 most common languages. Of course, English is the number one language. Spanish is the second most common. Chinese is the third, and French is the fourth. Now, the Modern Language Association has put all this information together in different ways. So, for example, you can look up a particular language, let's say Korean, and see how many speakers there are throughout the United States. There are almost 900,000 Korean speakers in the United States. Then you can see how that compares to the total number of speakers of languages other than English. So, of the people who speak another language, 2% are Korean speakers. It's also possible to see how many Korean speakers there are in different areas. Two main areas of concentration are Southern California and Washington State. Now, another way you can look at the information is by starting with place. The entire United States, a state, a county, or a city. So, for example, looking at the state of Texas. In Texas, English is spoken at home by just over 68% of people. Of the people who speak another language, 86% speak Spanish, and it's only 1 or 2% for any of the other languages. So, Spanish really is the predominant language other than English in Texas. Now, you can then compare that information to other states. For example, looking at the state of New York. In New York, a little over 72% of people speak English at home. Of the speakers of other languages, 49% speak Spanish, and then 8% speak Chinese, 6% speak Italian, and 4% speak Russian, and 4% speak French. So you can see that there are a lot of Spanish speakers in New York, but there are also other languages spoken, more so than in Texas. Okay, so there are different ways to look at this data. let's talk about possible ways this information could be used or why it's important. I'd like to open this up for discussion. Do you have any ideas? Yes, in the front row.
I think this could be important for educational purposes. You know, so people know what kinds of classes might be needed in the schools and things like that. And, I think it's also important to understand the cultural makeup of the United States.
Yes, definitely. Anyone else? Yes?
Isn't it also important to be aware of possible language change? You know, if one language is being used less or more over time?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we're out of time, but we're going to talk about language change next week. So, we'll discuss it more then.
Okay, now, what do you think the best summary of the lecture you have listened to? Okay, here we have three choices. Number one, is it the number of different languages used in the United States? Or B, data about language use in the United States and how it might be used? Or why it's important to look at language use in the United States? What do you think? I believe that the best summary of the lecture we have listened to is C. Why it's important to look at language use in the United States. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the second listening practice of Chapter 7. In this section, you are going to listen to two students give a presentation in class about languages. After you listen, number the topics in the order they are mentioned.
Our presentation today is on language change and language loss in the world. First, we'll talk about what the situation is, and then we'll give some examples of programs being implemented. Alan, do you want to begin?
Okay, first, some background on the situation. There are actually differing views on how many languages exist in the world today. Most estimates say that there are somewhere between 6,000 and 6,800 languages still in use. Unfortunately, many of these languages are in danger of disappearing, of becoming extinct. Now, it's hard to find an exact estimate on how many, but some people believe that as many as half of the languages still in use could be lost by the end of the century. Think of it, half of the languages that exist.
Here's a more specific example of how languages are being lost. An article in the magazine Nature in 2003 stated that there are 46 different people around the world who are the last remaining speakers of their language.
Wow. Imagine if you were the only speaker of your language left.
Yes. Now, one of the problems with all this is that it's very difficult to get complete agreement on actual language numbers. And then it's also hard to find agreement on the number of languages that are at risk of disappearing. One of the big reasons for this is that the criteria used are often very different.
Let's look at an example. For instance, some researchers might consider a language in danger if there are less than 10,000 speakers of it left, while other researchers might not consider a language in danger until there are only 500 speakers left. The point is that different researchers have different ideas about when they might say that a language is really in danger of disappearing, so it's a problem.
But for the most part, they all agree that languages are in fact disappearing.
Oh yes, that's true. And most agree that it's happening quite quickly.
So then the question is, why is this important? Should we be concerned about language loss? Obviously, people might have differing opinions on this. Some people might say it doesn't matter too much, that in fact, fewer languages could make it easier to communicate.
Another viewpoint is that it is important, that we don't actually know what information, traditions, or things like that we're losing when a language disappears.
So that's the situation in terms of language loss. The good news is that there are some actions that appear to help, and there are some examples of languages that are in a better state than they were. For example, Welsh, the language spoken in Wales. There were fewer and fewer speakers of Welsh in Wales as more people started speaking English exclusively. But the country started working very hard to increase the number of speakers of Welsh, teaching and using Welsh in the schools and encouraging the use of Welsh in public forums, and there has been some progress.
Native American languages in North America are another example. There were once more than 250 languages spoken by Native Americans. Unfortunately, experts now estimate that there are only about 150 languages still in use. And even more unfortunate, experts think that very few of these are likely to exist in 60 years. But there are some interesting programs being used to try to keep some of the languages alive. Claudia, can you give some examples?
Yes. One typical problem is that in many cases the remaining speakers are elderly, so they're trying to take advantage of the older people's knowledge while they still can. They tape record the older people who can speak the language in order to have an audio record of the language. In some cases, they also might have a linguist work with the older people to get information about grammar and vocabulary. It's a little sad, but obviously having all that information recorded gives the possibility that they can still work on the language even after these remaining speakers are gone. Another way they use the knowledge that the elders have is by having the older people work with the children. They babysit or help with preschool and speaking the language. They're doing this with the Navajo language in the Southwest.
It's interesting because in some places, distance is a real problem.
Like in Alaska?
Yes, Alaska is a good example. People might not be able to get together to speak because of distance, so they teach and learn over the phone.
Now, as Alan mentioned, with some of the Native American languages, there are actually no longer any living speakers. So there are also some examples where people are trying to learn the language of their ancestors by studying old records. Obviously, this would be a very difficult process.
Yes, and it is important to say that these kinds of programs are difficult and slow. In the end, they may not be enough.
Yes, true. Are there any questions?
Okay. As you can see here, we have 5 different topics. Number 1, programs for reviving Native American languages. 2, different opinions on how many languages exist today. 3, the situation with the Welsh language. 4, criteria for deciding if a language is in danger. And the last one, why the topic of language loss is important. Okay, how about the order of these topics? What was the first topic discussed in this presentation? The first topic was different opinions on how many languages exist today. How about the second one? The second one was criteria for deciding if a language is in danger. The third topic was why the topic of language loss is important. The fourth topic was the situation with the Welsh language. And the last topic discussed in this presentation was programs for reviving Native American languages. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to chapter 10 of this book, which deals with education. The main objectives of this chapter include 1. To identify opinions and supporting arguments. 2. To reflect on listening. 3. To use repetition for emphasis. And 4. To apply your collocations related to education in speaking. The vocabulary log of this chapter include words like recognize, precious, issue, evaluate, assessment, falsify, subjective, standard, vague, mess around, eventually, accept, seminar, and amazing. Now, you are going to listen to a radio commercial for a college. After you listen, check the 3 topics that Ben and Mona mentioned. Do they have the same opinion on the subject or not?
Do you want to learn something new and improve your job possibilities? Are you looking for a degree program that will recognize all your unique life experience? Consider Westside College. We design programs around your busy life and, more importantly, give you credit for your life experience, because you shouldn't have to waste precious time and money in unnecessary classes. We'll use our life and learning assessment to evaluate your experience. Based on this assessment, we'll be able to see how you can apply your experience to the requirements for your course of study. Call today and make an appointment to meet with one of our advisors. You won't regret it. Our number is...
Do they really do that now?
What?
Give you credit in college for life experience.
Yes, they do. Not all colleges and universities do, of course, but more and more are starting to do it. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Really?
Yes, don't you?
Well, maybe, but I think there are a lot of issues around it. For example, how can they really evaluate your life experience?
Like they said, they have an assessment. I think there are different ways they assess. Students often have to take a test to prove they have a certain level of knowledge. Some places also use something like a portfolio of previous learning. That's something that a student has to put together with examples and documentation to show that he or she has learned certain things.
But couldn't something like that be falsified? It seems like it would be pretty easy to make some things up.
Maybe, but I don't think it's as easy as you'd think. My aunt works at the community college. They accept life experience for credit, and she says that they're really strict in deciding who gets credit. The students have to put a lot into these portfolios of previous learning. It seems like it would be a lot of work to falsify something like that. It could be almost as much work as doing the class.
I don't agree. It seems so subjective. How can you compare and evaluate different experiences? For example, what if one person has lots of work experience in computer programming and another person has a lot of experience in taking care of little children? Could you get credit for both experiences? And if so, would you get the same amount of credit or what?
Well, I doubt that 2 people like that would be trying to get the same amount of credit in exactly the same situation. You know, the standards for testing and evaluation for regular courses aren't completely objective either. There is always some level of subjectivity when teachers mark and give grades and things like that.
Yes, but the system itself is pretty objective, and it just seems a little unfair. It takes discipline to go to college. You have to attend, do the work, take exams, and pass classes in order to get credit. And then some people get around that with life experience. It seems like an easy way out to me.
I don't know. Think about how many people say they didn't really learn anything in college. For many people, college is mainly social, and then they really start learning after they graduate from college. That was certainly true for me, and if you have to consider that people who enroll in college later in life are in a different situation, they've often had a lot of work experience, and they usually don't have time to take every class from the beginning. That doesn't seem fair.
I see your point, but it still seems vague and subjective to evaluate something like life experience and then give credit.
Well, I guess it's a good thing neither one of us is considering going back to college.
Yes, you're probably right.
Okay, as you can see here, we have 5 topics. We have ways to evaluate life experience. We have standards for testing and evaluation. Kinds of teachers in college, discipline needed to attend college, and college sports. The question is, what are the 3 topics that Ben and Mona mentioned? According to the audio track, the 3 topics mentioned were: number 1, ways to evaluate life experience. 2. Standards for testing and evaluation. 3. Discipline needed to attend college. And kinds of teachers in college and college sports were among the topics which have not been discussed by Ben and Mona. Okay, the next question is, do they have the same opinion on the subject? The question or the answer is no. They do not have the same opinion, meaning that they disagree with each other, Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much and see you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the second listening practice of chapter 10. In this section, you are going to listen to 4 college graduates talk about their experiences in college. After you listen, match the beginnings and endings of the sentences.
I guess you could say I was a late developer. My grades weren't good enough for a 4-year college. I didn't work hard enough in high school, so I wound up at the community college. And I didn't study very hard there either, at least not for the first year. I just really wasn't interested in anything. But in my second year there, one day I had to do a project on the computer. Of course, computers were quite new in those days, and I got interested, really interested. It was fun messing around on computers, trying to figure things out. Eventually, I changed my major to computer science. It was a new field, but it was growing fast. And it was obvious there was a huge future there. I started working, transferred to a 4-year college, and graduated with honors. After I graduated, my friend got me a job at a software company. I worked there for a few years, and eventually I went out on my own. Now I have a very stable business with more than 20 employees, and I guess you could say I'm quite successful. So I don't think it makes a bit of difference which school you go to or how much you pay for it. It's what you do with it that's important.
I got an undergraduate degree from the local state university. My family didn't have a lot of money, so that was my only option at that point, really. My dream had always been to go to an Ivy League school like Harvard or Yale, but we just couldn't afford it. I had to work part-time while I was studying, and then I worked 2 jobs during the summer to pay for school. I was pretty happy at the state school. I got good grades, and I felt like I was getting a good education, but I still wished I could have gone to a school like Harvard. Then, one of my professors suggested that I think about going to grad school and getting a master's degree. I'd never really considered it before, but I decided to apply anyway. My professor suggested different schools to apply to, including Harvard, and I thought, well, it's worth a try. I didn't know if I'd get accepted, and I really didn't know how I'd pay for it, but I decided to try anyway. Well, I was accepted, and it was very hard. Hard in terms of studying and hard financially. But I did it. I honestly don't know if doing my master's at an Ivy League school made all that much difference in the end, in what I learned or the jobs I've gotten. But I'm glad I did it.
I went to a very small state college, but it was kind of unusual. There was a big emphasis on hands-on learning, group work, seminars, debates, discussions. It was really active, and you were expected to participate. I don't think it would be for everyone, but I really loved it. Like, you couldn't just sit there and take notes. You were expected to engage with the information and ask questions. I was always getting in trouble in regular school for asking questions, so I loved it. You might think it was easier, but I think they asked more of you than they do in a regular university. You had to write your own academic plan at the beginning of every year and discuss it with the teachers. And this is the part that really is different. You wrote your own self-evaluation at the end of every semester. They didn't give grades. They gave narrative evaluations. Like, each professor wrote a paragraph about your strengths and weaknesses. You know, it's amazing. Those evaluations meant a lot more to us than grades would have, and they were a lot more informative, actually. Some people didn't like them at all. They wanted an A or a B or whatever, but that wasn't the way they did it.
My parents and my grandparents immigrated to this country from Mexico when I was 12, and they never had much education. But that was the big thing they wanted for me. The most important thing was education. They were pushing me all through school, always checking my homework, putting me in summer school, and things like that. They were so happy when I got accepted to college. But college was tough for me. High school was pretty easy, but you're expected to be a lot more independent in college, to study and work on your own. And I didn't really understand that at the beginning. And I felt really insecure because English isn't my first language. And I had to write a lot of papers in English. It was really hard at first, and my grades weren't always so good. But I made it in the end. Nobody in our family had ever graduated from college before, so it was a big deal for the whole family.
Okay, as you can see here, we have 4 people. We have Tom, Tracy, Ed, and Alicia. And we also have 4 experiences in college. This include fulfilled a personal dream, went to an unusual school, fulfilled a family's dream, and discovered an interest that later became a career. So, you are required to match the beginnings and endings of the sentence according to the people here. How about Tom? How about Tom's experiences in college? For Tom, he discovered an interest that later became a career. For Tracy, she fulfilled a personal dream. For Ed, he went to an unusual school. And finally, Alicia, she fulfilled a family's dream. That's all for today. Thank you very much, and see you.